What's going on, YouTube? Welcome to the Credit Plug channel. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well as smash the like button. Also, as a reminder that this is not financial advice. This is for informational purposes only. So for today's video, I wanted to share some major news regarding the PPP and EIDL loan fraud. So President Joe Biden just recently signed two bills aimed at catching pandemic loan cheats. President Biden signed a pair of bills Friday that will give the Justice Department more time to investigate and prosecute people accused of fraudulently collecting government payments aimed at helping small businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. The bill, which recently passed Congress with vast bipartisan support, established 10-year statute of limitations for criminal charges and civil enforcement. In October 2020, the Small Business Administration's Office of Inspector General identified $78.1 billion in potentially fraudulent EIDL loans and grants paid to ineligible entities, and another $6.7 billion in loans and grants linked to an alleged identity theft. Last year, the agency watchdog identified more than 70,000 PPP loans totaling more than $4.6 billion that were potentially fraudulent. According to Joe Biden, American people deserve to know that their tax dollars are being spent as intended. My message to those cheats out there is this: you can't hide. We're going to find you and we're going to make you pay back what you stole and hold you accountable under the law. So a couple key points of these new bills. So basically what's happened is that they've extended the statute of limitations for criminal as well as civil enforcement for PPP as well as EIDL loan fraud. So basically what this means is that prosecutors now have a longer time horizon to investigate and prosecute any fraud related cases to PPP and EIDL. Another thing I wanted to point out is that the fact that this was overwhelmingly bipartisan. So that means both sides of the political aisle, Republicans and Democrats, came together to pass this bill. So they're pretty much sending a strong message that they're serious about going after people who committed PPP or EIDL loan fraud. So the new bill, entitled PPP and Bank Fraud Enforcement Harmonization Act of 2022. So the purpose of the PPP and Bank Fraud Harmonization Act of 2022 is to establish a statute of limitations of 10 years for paycheck protection loan fraud cases. Now, this was introduced on March 31st, 2022. So just to give you a background, the Small Business Paycheck Protection Program was established in the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security CARES Act as a sub-program of SBA's 7A Loan Guarantee Program. Under PPP, banks, credit unions, and CDFIs, as well as financial technology companies, Fintechs, made fully guaranteed SBA loans to small businesses negatively impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The loans were intended to assist small businesses with meeting payroll costs and offers full loan forgiveness if the loan proceeds are spent on such purposes. In total, more than $800 billion was appropriated for PPP. In creating the PPP, Congress emphasized the rapid delivery of funds and recruited thousands of new lenders, including non-bank fintech companies, to help distribute loan funds swiftly. Initially, the SBA did not have sufficient controls in place to prevent fraud. Managing COVID-19 stimulus lending is one of the most significant challenges facing the SBA. SBA's Office of Inspector General has identified 70,000 loans totaling over $4.6 billion in potentially fraudulent PPP loans. On March 1st, 2022, in his State of the Union address, President Biden announced the appointment of a Department of Justice special prosecutor for COVID-19 pandemic fraud as part of an ongoing administrative-wide effort to punish pandemic-related fraud, including PPP fraud. One of the biggest challenges identified in prosecuting PPP fraud is the discrepancy in the statute of limitations governing bank-originated and fintech-originated PPP fraud. Specifically, the most bank-originated PPP fraud is prosecuted as bank fraud, which has a 10-year statute of limitation. Meanwhile, fintech-originated PPP fraud must be prosecuted as wire fraud, since fintech companies are technically not financial institutions and are therefore not governed by the bank fraud statute. This means prosecutors only have a 5-year statute of limitations to prosecute fintech-originated PPP fraud. This legislation treats all PPP fraud like bank fraud and harmonizes the statute of limitations for fintech-originated PPP fraud with that for bank fraud. On April 20th, 2021, the committee held a hearing where members heard an update on SBA's pandemic response programs, which included PPP and COVID EIDL from SBA's Office of Inspector General, OIG, and the Government Accountability Office. During the hearing, Mr. Hannibal Mike Ware, Inspector General, testified that fraud investigations related to these programs will be a decades-long effort due to the performance of these loans within SBA's portfolios and the statute of limitation of fraud. At the hearing, Mr. Ware mentioned that a significant portion of COVID EIDLs will come due for payment near the end of fiscal year 2024, which will be a key moment to realize the true scope of fraud related with the program. All right, so just to summarize, basically what this new bank fraud enforcement bill is basically harmonizing the statute of limitations between bank fraud and wire fraud. So bank fraud has a 10-year statute of limitations, but since a lot of fintech companies originated PPP loans, which only have a 5-year statute of limitation because it would have to be prosecuted as wire fraud because fintechs don't fall under, the bank statute of limitations. So basically what they're doing is they're extending it so that if a PPP loan was originated through a fintech organization, they don't have 5 years to prosecute. They now have 10 years. Now, this is basically sending a clear message for those who have committed EIDL or PPP loan fraud is that the federal government is going to investigate and prosecute. Now, I wanted to go over some of the top reasons why people are going to get caught for PPP as well as EIDL loan fraud, right? So now they've extended the statute of limitations to 10 years across, both PPP, EIDL, whether it was bank originated, fintech originated. So they're going to be looking into all of the information, all of the data, and it's going to take a while. As the Inspector General's mentioned, this is going to be a decades long investigation. And one of the key points that he made was that in 2024, a lot of the EIDL loans are going to be coming due for their first payment. So basically what they're going to see after that is, how many of those loans actually went to default, like, people who took out a loan and then aren't paying that loan. So come 2024, they're really going to see, the scope of the pandemic related fraud. Now, there's a couple easy ways to detect whether or not the loan application was fraudulent. Now for PPP, which is Paycheck Protection Program, so those funds were supposed to be used for maintaining your payroll. Now, any business owner who has employees, they're going to be filing what's called a Form 941. So a lot of people who may have fraudulently applied for a PPP loan, they didn't file the 941. So that's a very easy check that they can do. And that actually says how many employees that you have. So, for those who inflated the number of employees that they have on the application, and then the Form 941 either was not filed or it was a huge discrepancy between what they filed and what they put on the application. Your business had to be in existence for, a certain time before being eligible. So let's say if you started a business in March of 2020, you wouldn't have been eligible for that first round of PPP or EIDL, right? So you would have had to be in business prior to a certain date. So what people were actually doing was after the COVID-19 funds were issued and dispersed, they actually created a business and then apply for the PPP or EIDL loan. So based off of the articles of organization, that's a very easy check. Okay, the articles of organization was filed on this particular date. Were you in business before the program came about? Now, another very easy check is if you even had a business to begin with, because a lot of applications were for non-existent businesses. So that's going to be very easy to detect, right? Was the paperwork filed? And that's another point I want to make too, right? When we're talking about funds and getting loans from financial institutions, from banks, or even the federal government, you got to make sure that your paperwork is in order. It's your articles of organization, your SS4 form, which has your EIN, have an operating agreement, have a business bank account linked to your business, have your accounting software set up, because they're going to be auditing a lot of these loans, right? To see, what information you put on the application actually checks out. Now, with a lot of those applications, EIDL as well as PPP, you are basically self-certifying. So you're basically stating that the information that you put on this application is true to your best knowledge. And then you actually have, legitimate PPP loans, right? So, someone may have qualified for a PPP loan, or maybe they didn't really qualify, but the intended use of funds. So there's a lot of cases out here where people took those funds and went out and bought cars, bought Lambos, bought houses, boat, watches, things like that. So they're going to be detecting that type of information because, when the money goes to your bank account, that creates a trail, right? A paper trail. So that's something they can easily audit. Now, another very easy way that they're going to be able to detect EIDL or PPP fraud is through your tax transcripts and your tax filings, right? Because if you're putting, a certain amount of, gross revenue and expenses on the loan application, and you do have to self-certify, which basically means that you're attesting that the information that you put on that application is correct. So let's say, a fraudulent application, put that they made X amount, but there's no associated tax returns to verify that information. Now, overall, the federal government is sending a clear message that they're coming after and investigating those who committed PPP or EIDL loan frauds. Now, this is part of a much bigger problem, in my opinion, where there's just a lack of financial integrity. And you also have this normalization of, scamming and fraud. It seems like it's become so normalized that, people are actually doing it in the open publicly, as well as flaunting it on social media. So definitely get your paperwork in order. I'm always preaching, having your documents in order, right? Filing your taxes, having your articles of organization, your operating agreement, having your business bank account, and just doing things by the book, right? One thing you want to do is keep good records, right? Good record keeping is going to help you, right? So when you have good paperwork, it's going to be much easier for you to get access to financing from different banks and lenders because all your information is organized. So what you can do is get set up with an accounting software. QuickBooks, I highly recommend. You also want to get set up with a payroll provider, right? Because if you're paying yourself through your business, you don't want to just withdraw money from your business bank account. You actually want to get set up with a payroll provider where you can actually run payroll and there's a record of that, right? And so, when it's time to produce records for income verification, you have all those documents and you're withholding taxes and you're just doing things by the book. So I definitely recommend having a business bank account. That's one thing you can do. Get set up with an accounting software to keep records of all your business financials, and also getting set up with the payroll provider. So I've dropped links in the description of the video. Anyways, that's all I wanted to cover in today's video. Until next time, take it easy and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.